One factor contributing to poverty, stagnating wages. As this graphic shows, wages adjusted for inflation have been virtually flat during the past 45 years, but consumer prices have been rising sharply during that same period.
My name is Asher Edelman.
Asher Edelman is most famous for being the real-life stockbroker and corporate raider who inspired the Gordon Gekko character in Oliver Stone's Wall Street.
The point is, ladies and gentlemen, that greed is good.
But he recently shot to national fame again when he made this public assessment of our economy.
But 80% of the Americans have been in a recession for at least 15 years.
Seems like nobody realizes we are in one, and certainly nobody realizes we've been in one for 15 years.
Who is your nobody? People can buy less for what they have now than they could 15 years ago. In their lives, that's a recession.
According to Asher Edelman, trickle-down theory has long been disproven. The wealthy 1% only spend a tiny fraction of their income, while the rest of us in the bottom tier of earners, we spend everything we make.
When you go to Reaganomics and you try to release money to the rich in the hope that it'll trickle down to the others, we have proven time and time again, this is nonsense. It doesn't trickle down anywhere. The man with $1 million income who makes another $100,000 is more likely than not to spend it. And he generally invests it in a secondary investment, not a primary investment. He will create no jobs with it. He will create no consumption with it normally. The man who earns $30,000 a year, or right now nothing, and has some money added to that, will spend the money added to that because he needs to spend the money added to that.
All of it gets spent, and it rotates or has a velocity in the economy and helps the economy grow.
The small fraction of what the 1% spend of their income is not going to stimulate the economy significantly.
It simply goes mostly into shares or houses or investments that are non-productive. As you've had a transfer of wealth to the top and a transfer of income to the top, you have a shrinking consumer base, basically, and you have a shrinking velocity of money.
We're asking everybody, essentially, who you think the best candidate for the economy would be.
Bernie Sanders.
Without a doubt. Why is that?
No question.
Policies?
Bernie Sanders wants to not only create fiscal stimulation, but get banks to make loans to small businesses again. 170 of our nation's top economists have endorsed Bernie Sanders' plan to reform Wall Street. And President Clinton's former labor secretary has wholeheartedly endorsed Sanders' specific plan to break up the big banks.
Bernie is the only candidate in either party who understands and thinks about this conceptually to build roads, to build schools, things that got people working again, as in the days of Roosevelt.
Government by organized money is just as dangerous as government by organized mob.
Rated by most scholars as one of America's top 3 presidents alongside Washington and Lincoln, Roosevelt's plan was called the New Deal. He pulled us out of our Great Depression with government jobs for the unemployed, economic stimulus plans, and banking reform. And if that sounds familiar, it's because it's really similar to Bernie Sanders' New Deal.
So the next time that you hear me attacked as a socialist, like tomorrow, remember this: I don't believe government should take over, the grocery store down the street, or own the means of production. But I do believe that the middle class and the working families of this country who produce the wealth of this country deserve a decent standard of living, and that their incomes should go up, not down.
For more about this and its connection to poverty, we're joined now via Skype from Richmond, Virginia by Robin Farzad. He's a contributor for Bloomberg Businessweek. So let's talk a little bit about this gap between wages and purchasing power. Why is that different?
Because if you're just tempted to look at the fact that, I made $50 a week, let's say for argument's sake, in 1970, and I make $60 right now, so it's not bad. And in reality, you're fooling yourself in real terms, because inflation is pernicious even if it's growing in the low single digits, like 2% or 2.5%, like we've been used to for the past decade. When you compound it over several decades, it's like singeing off 3/4 of your dollar every time you take it out of your pocket. So people tend to look at things in nominal terms, and in the end, when they can't buy as much as they used to on what they were making, they get blindsided.
But what are some of the factors contributing to it? People will say, listen, now I have access to goods and services from all over the world at even cheaper prices, so maybe I don't need to make as much.
Well, that has tempered the pain, certainly, but that is also a function of really aggressive offshoring and outsourcing. And these jobs, these decent manufacturing jobs, and you used to be able to be a high school graduate or at worst, maybe you have an associate's degree from a 2-year program at a college and get a decent living wage and maybe get benefits and have hopes of raising a family of 4 and putting kids through high school and whatnot. And that has so deteriorated in cloud over the past several decades. You can't count on there being good paying jobs. People are realizing that their pension programs are no longer guaranteed, that companies are using increasingly part-time workers and contract workers.
Bernie Sanders.
Without a doubt. Why is that?
No question.
Policies? Let's move on to the presidential elections. I'm curious, we're asking everybody essentially who you think the best candidate for the economy would be.
Bernie Sanders.
Without a doubt. Why is that?
No question.
Policies?
Well, I think it's quite simple again. If you look at something called velocity of money, you guys know what that is, I presume. That means how much gets spent and turns around. When you have the top 1% getting money, they spend 5–10% of what they earn. When you have the lower end of the economy getting money, they spend 100 or 110% of what they earn. As you've had a transfer of wealth to the top and a transfer of income to the top, you have a shrinking consumer base, basically, and you have a shrinking velocity of money. Bernie is the only person out there who I think is talking at all about both fiscal stimulation and banking rules that will get the banks to begin to generate lending again as opposed to speculation.
Okay.
So from an economic point of view, it's straightforward.